No one dared enter, not the guards, not the advisors, not even the Queen Mother, whose voice once echoed through council chambers like thunder. Now she stood in the corridor with eyes cast down, listening to nothing, no commands, no footsteps, just the slow dripping of rain from the stone arches above. And yet, life moved on in the rest of the palace, or at least pretended to. The Minister of State passed notes instead of entering chambers. The cook left trays outside the mirrored doors, untouched and retrieved hours later, food rotted, plates sometimes cracked. And the maids whispered they said he had started asking the mirror questions, long questions, questions that didn't make sense. One day it was about the wind over northern passes, where no one had travelled in months. Another about a boy born in a village, burned to ash decades ago. He would mutter, then pause and nod, as if the glass had spoken back. When a court artist was summoned last month to repaint the portrait gallery, he made the mistake of asking where to begin. The emperor didn't answer, but the mirror did, or so the painter claimed. His face went pale, and he dropped his brush mid-stroke. They say he left the palace barefoot, never returned to his studio, and has since taken a vow of silence in a chapel far from the city. Inside the council, fear spread. Some wanted to depose him quietly. Others insisted it was a phase, a condition, temporary mental disturbance, they said. But no one denied the truth. The emperor no longer saw them. He only saw the mirror. And in turn, it began to feel like the mirror saw them back. Some started avoiding reflections. Silverware was dulled on purpose. Mirrors removed from guest rooms. One minister scratched the polish off his boots so he wouldn't see his own face while walking the marbled halls. Another refused to enter any room with polished glass. Only one man spoke openly. Commander Veka, a soldier, practical, brutal. He's lost his mind, he declared at a midnight meeting. And if no one acts, that mirror will speak death for all of us. That night, Veka disappeared. His boots were found in the west courtyard, heels pointing inward, toes out, like he'd turned to face something and vanished. The emperor never mentioned him. But the next morning, the mirror stood cleaned and glistening as if wiped with care. That same day, 3 new guards were posted outside the mirror room. They were not chosen from the regular rotation. They did not speak. They wore black gloves and bore no insignias. One of them carried no weapon, only a velvet cloth, the kind used to polish glass. People whisper that he's mad, that he talks to glass, that the empire is no longer ruled by a man but by his reflection. But what if they're wrong? Tell us in the comments. Is this madness or something more dangerous? And if you want to know how far this emperor will go and what's hiding on the other side of that mirror, subscribe. You won't want to miss what comes next. Before the silence, before the mirror, before the rooms fell cold, there was a boy. He was born in a crimson storm. That's what the old midwife had said, though no one recorded the weather that day. What they did record was the eclipse. Midday turned to dusk, crows spun in low circles over the city, and a riverbank cracked open in the south, swallowing a stone chapel whole. The omen was undeniable. The empire had an heir. His name was not spoken freely in those early years. He was the child, the one, the center. He was raised on whispers and incense. Tutors rotated like seasons, and only one survived more than 2 winters. She was a woman from the coast, pale eyes, voice like glass. She taught him how to speak without raising his voice. Power, she told him once, is not in what you say, but in how long others wait for you to say it. By age 10, he had memorized the names of every province, every general, every trader with more than 10 horses in the east. By 12, he could read contracts and override them. By 13, he rewrote the tax code. But it wasn't the brilliance that made the court nervous. It was the precision. He didn't argue, he observed, he asked questions that turned stomachs. He once asked a high priest how many drops of blood it took to fill a chalice. No one knew why. He loved symmetry. He would rearrange books by the weight of their spines. Once, when a servant placed a vase slightly off-center on a banquet table, the boy noticed instantly and corrected it without a word. When the previous emperor, his father, died suddenly, some say it was his heart, others say poison in the ink pot, the boy didn't cry. He stood beside the open coffin, studying the way the beard was trimmed. Later, behind closed doors, he asked the embalmer why the eyelids hadn't been sewn tighter. They look as if they're still watching, he said. The man quit his post the next day. The coronation was held at night by his own order. Let them see me lit by fire, not sunlight, he said. The people called him brilliant, majestic, gifted. But in the west wing of the palace, a quiet fear was growing. The Queen Mother kept mirrors covered after sunset. He watches himself too long, she whispered once. He doesn't blink. Still, no one stopped him. Why would they? Under his rule, the economy surged. Borders held firm. Even the barbarians in the mountain passes offered tribute instead of war. The people cheered. But the man inside the crown was changing. He stopped attending council meetings in person. His messages arrived sealed and written in an unfamiliar hand. Long, curling strokes. Unlike his usual tight script. When asked, he simply said, "A new rhythm." His chambers grew darker, curtains stayed drawn, candles burned low, and the tapestries were replaced by flat, reflective panels made of polished obsidian. "I want to see depth," he explained once. "Flat walls lie," no one argued. Then one spring evening he ordered a chamber constructed inside the palace, a room within a room with no windows, no doors, and only one object inside, a mirror. It was brought from the Far East, wrapped in black silk, escorted by soldiers who never spoke. The merchant who delivered it vanished. His ship was found abandoned in the harbor, crew gone, cargo untouched. From that night on, the emperor spent hours inside the mirror room. No one was allowed in, only he had the key. Once, a young scribe slipped inside by accident, delivering papers. He was found hours later in the library basement, curled in a fetal position, whispering, he wasn't alone in there was another. When asked who, the boy just shook his head and began to laugh. The laughter echoed. It filled corridors, then stopped. From that day, the mirror became a second throne. The mirror room had no windows, no candles, no light, except what the emperor brought with him. A single lantern, its flame tinted blue with salts, only the royal apothecary could produce. The light made his reflection tremble. He said that was how truth revealed itself when it flickered. He spent hours seated before it, not moving, not blinking, sometimes mouthing words silently, other times speaking aloud, voice low, intimate, like a lover's whisper. The mirror never fogged, never cracked, never showed the dust of time. And over the months, the emperor spoke to it more than he did to anyone else. "Tell me again," he murmured once, "how the minister lied." Another time, "You remember her face, don't you? She came to me in blue, said I looked like him." No one knew who he meant. It wasn't just whispers. Rituals began, quiet ones at first. A single bowl of water placed before the mirror, untouched, then removed before dawn. A line of salt drawn at the threshold and swept away only by the emperor's own hand. The room smelled of ink and wet stone and something else, something like iron. When the high vicar requested entry to bless the space, the emperor declined. "God can observe from the hall," he said. "He's not invited in." One night a sound was heard, sharp and rhythmic, like footsteps, but only one set, left, then right, then left again. But no door opened. The guards outside said nothing had passed. And yet something had moved inside, something had walked. That morning, the emperor emerged smiling. His robe was buttoned wrong. His hands smelled of ash. He didn't sleep that night, or the next, or the next. The royal physician begged an audience. The emperor allowed it. Briefly, "You haven't slept in 4 days," the physician said gently. "You're pale. Your pupils are uneven." The emperor replied, "What need does a mirror have for sleep?" Then turned away. After that, no one was allowed to speak to him directly unless spoken to first. The rule was enforced silently but absolutely. One guard who greeted him in passing, just 2 words, "Good morning," was reassigned to the border outpost within the hour. His family received a sealed note and never heard from him again. Inside the palace, new staff were hired. They never gave names, wore no crests, pale uniforms, clean hands. They moved only at night. Their tasks were never explained. One of them was seen polishing every reflective surface with what looked like wine, dark oil. When a maid asked what it was, he simply replied, "Distortion balm." Even the emperor's private bath was altered. The pool's tiles were replaced with obsidian slabs. No ripples, no reflections, just depth. But what disturbed the court most were the drawings. No one knew when he began making them. They were discovered by accident, tucked into books, folded behind maps, pressed between the pages of ancient treaties. Always the same image. A tall figure in robes, featureless face, standing behind the emperor's own likeness. In every sketch, the mirror was there, but it reflected something else. Scholars tried to analyze them. Some said it was stress, others a cry for help. But the more they studied, the stranger it became. The mirror's angle shifted in each drawing, impossible angles, ones that violated perspective. A few sketches showed reflections of events that hadn't happened yet. One depicted the main hall filled with crows. A week later, 100 crows crashed into the eastern tower windows during a thunderstorm. Another showed the emperor weeping in front of a cracked mirror, but the mirror never cracked, not yet. Then came the disappearances. At first, it was minor, a valet who failed to report, a scribe who left mid-shift, a seamstress who never came back from lunch, all within weeks, all from the inner court. Then someone noticed a pattern. They had all entered the mirror room. Only the emperor ever came back. A secretary found an unsent letter on the desk of the last missing man, it read. He talks to it. But it's talking back now. I swear it moves when he doesn't. The light doesn't touch it. I don't know what he sees, but I know it's not us anymore. The council met in secret, talked of intervention, of exile, even regicide. But none agreed who would confront him. None wanted to be the one seen by the mirror. And as if sensing their doubt, the emperor did something no one expected. He invited them all to dinner. The invitations were handwritten in violet ink, folded in black paper, sealed with silver wax. Each bore a name, no titles, no pleasantries, just the name. The dinner was scheduled for the following moonrise. No agenda, no explanation, just one sentence at the bottom. Wear no metal, bring no mirrors, speak only when asked. They came anyway. How could they not? The 12 most powerful figures in the empire, ministers, advisors, generals, the high vicar, all gathered in the hall of blue stone. The room had changed. The usual banners were gone. The chandeliers were unlit. In their place stood tall columns of black glass, dimly glowing from within. The walls were bare and smooth, polished to a dark sheen. There were no chairs. The table was long, narrow, and covered in a cloth that shimmered like still water at dusk, and at the head of it he stood, the emperor, thin, pale, taller than they remembered. His eyes glinted, not with light, but with some inner shine that made it hard to hold his gaze. He greeted no one, just lifted his hand and gestured. They sat silently. A single bowl was placed before each guest, black ceramic, filled with clear broth. No spoon, no bread, no wine. The emperor did not eat. He stared down the table. Tonight, he said, you will hear what I hear. No one responded, not even the vicar, whose fingers twitched with the urge to speak. You believe I'm unwell, the emperor continued, that I've strayed, that I've replaced counsel with madness. I understand. A pause. You think the mirror controls me. Another pause. You're wrong. The silence cracked then, not from the guests, but from the far wall. It wasn't a sound exactly, more like a distortion, like the air had folded or twisted, a shimmer. And suddenly behind the emperor it appeared, the mirror. It hadn't been there before. No one saw it brought in. No one saw it move. But now it stood, gleaming, immense, taller than any man, framed in something that looked like petrified bone. The surface rippled, not like water, but like something trying to imitate water. A flicker passed through it, a shape gone. The room felt colder. The emperor stepped aside, turned slightly, looked not at them, but into the glass. She's listening, he said. Then, turning back to the table, one of you is not who you claim to be. The words dropped like stones. General Orestes flinched. Minister Dovet shifted in his seat. The vicar gripped the edge of the table. The emperor's gaze moved from face to face, slowly, studying, measuring. Speak, he commanded. No one did. Very well. He clapped once, soft. From the shadows a figure emerged, a young man, no older than 20, clean robes, no insignia, eyes that didn't blink. He carried a small box made of polished black wood. When opened, inside, a sheet of silvered glass, a mirror, small, handheld. The emperor took it, turned it toward the table. Let's see who reflects true. He moved from guest to guest, holding the mirror before each face, one by one. The first few, normal, their own reflections, pale and shaking. But at the fifth seat, something shifted. The reflection blinked before the minister did. Gasps. One chair scraped backward. The emperor's voice was calm. There, Minister Talvin stood. It's a trick, he hissed. A farce. But his reflection was already smiling, wide, too wide, and still staring as he turned away. Talvin lunged. A blade flashed from his sleeve. a thin shard of dark metal hidden against protocol. But before he could move another step, the young attendant raised a hand. The mirror in the Emperor's hand pulsed once, and Talvin's body locked in place, eyes wide, chest still, breath halted. The blade dropped, clattered, and Talvin tilted forward, then backward, then shattered. Not fell, shattered like porcelain. No blood, no bones, just silence. The guests froze. The Emperor returned to the head of the table, calm, collected. "She doesn't tolerate liars," he said, placing the mirror back in its velvet-lined box. "And she rewards loyalty." Then he smiled. "To the rest of you, thank you for your reflection." He left them in silence. The guests didn't move until dawn. After the dinner, the palace changed. Not all at once, not publicly, but in the way shadows began to stretch longer across the walls, in the way servants whispered less, in the way eyes dropped lower when footsteps echoed. The ministers returned to their chambers, hollow-eyed. Not one of them spoke of what happened. Talvin's name was never mentioned again. His quarters were sealed, his records erased. His family was relocated to the northern frontier with a generous stipend and a quiet warning. There was no Talvin. And still, the mirror stood in the Emperor's chamber, waiting, watching, or perhaps only reflecting. No one could agree any more on what it did. Then it happened again. One of the lower ministers, Relin, known for his caution and lack of ambition, was found standing in front of the mirror room at dawn, silent, shoes missing, hands trembling. When guards approached, he whispered, "I saw it blink." He was escorted away. Later that week, he jumped from the west tower. No note, just the word "sorry" carved into his left palm. Something had shifted in the mirror. People began to avoid its hallway entirely. Staff reassigned themselves. Guards rotated out early. One night, a dog broke loose in the inner courtyard and ran straight to the mirror door. It sat there, whimpering, then began howling without pause until it collapsed. It never made another sound again. The Emperor stopped holding court. Instead, orders came through a pale intermediary, the same young man from the dinner. He delivered decrees in scrolls sealed with black wax, all bearing the Emperor's symbol, an open eye. The decrees were strange. One ordered all reflective surfaces in public buildings covered by dusk. Another forbade glass blowing within 5 miles of the palace. Another banned portraits, and yet another instructed the court astronomers to cease all study of the moon. No explanation followed. No debate was allowed. Then, without warning, came the destruction. Minister Solan, head of finance, broke. No one knew what triggered it. But one morning, she marched into the central hall with a hammer, found an ornate mirror above the entrance arch, and shattered it. The sound was sharp and high, like crystal under fire. The shards flew everywhere. Silence followed. The room was empty, save for one guard. He tried to stop her, too late. Within the hour, she was gone. Not imprisoned, not executed, gone. Her chambers cleared, her records rewritten, her face no longer carved into the hall of ministers. Even her childhood tutors denied remembering her. Only the guard remained. He didn't speak again, but weeks later he began drawing on the walls of the guard barracks, shapes, circles, spirals, eyes. Always a single handprint at the center. The drawings were erased, but they returned. Eventually, he was reassigned to the ice colonies. The mirror room remained locked, but from certain angles, when the light hit just right, servants swore they saw something moving behind the stone, as if the wall itself had become semi-reflective. And then came the rumors that the Emperor was no longer alone inside, that he had a double. Some said it was a twin. Others whispered of a shadow conjured from blood. A few even claimed it was his future self. No one knew, but something was different. His silhouette, when glimpsed through the veiled windows, looked wrong. Longer in the arms, neck bent slightly too far to one side. One maid claimed she saw him in the hallway walking past, and then saw him again in the mirror's reflection, smiling when his back was turned. She fainted, never returned to work. Then came the glass plague. It began in the southern provinces. Artisans who worked with mirrors began falling ill. Their eyes became light-sensitive. Their speech slowed. They spoke of seeing things inside the surfaces, faces behind their own, not mimicking but waiting. Within a month, 32 glass workers were dead. 100 more suffered from uncontrollable tremors. The Emperor declared it an echo-contamination. All mirror production ceased. And still he visited the chamber. Every day, every night. Even when his health began to fail, he grew thinner, but his energy never waned. He spoke less, but his eyes never stopped moving, always scanning, always watching. And the mirror, it remained silent, until one night, when the guards reported hearing something, a laugh. Not the Emperor's, something deeper and closer. The laugh wasn't loud. It didn't echo through the halls. It didn't shake the walls or crack the glass. But the men who heard it, 2 elite guards stationed outside the mirror room, felt it crawl down their spines like frost. One of them dropped his spear. The other turned and walked away, never speaking again. From that night on, the Emperor ceased all public appearances. Even his silhouette vanished from behind the veiled curtains. The court, now ruled by decree and dread, dissolved into hushed obedience. But something else was unraveling. The empire began to collapse. Border towns fell to rebellion. Trade caravans vanished in the deserts. Ships disappeared in open waters. Their sails found adrift, but no crew aboard. Farmers in the eastern provinces refused to send grain, citing mirror rot, a phrase no one could explain. When generals demanded permission to act, the emperor responded with a single word: observe. It was his only reply for weeks. Even the young messenger, who now walked with a limp and spoke in a whisper that made skin crawl, delivered it without emotion. Whispers became panic. The people began to flee the capital. Markets emptied. Temples locked their doors. Windows were boarded, reflective surfaces painted black. A cathedral caught fire after someone smashed the stained glass during a sermon. They said he saw something move inside it, something that waved. The nobility stayed. They had nowhere else to go, but none approached the eastern wing anymore. The mirror's wing, until one man did. His name was Silar. A minor, noble, quiet, brilliant, loyal. He had served as royal archivist for 17 years. Silar had grown up in the palace, learned its shadows, memorized every hall. He had never spoken against the emperor, never questioned the mirror. But he noticed something the others didn't. The emperor's voice, when heard through the closed doors of the mirror room, had changed slightly, just slightly, not distorted, not unnatural, but younger, calmer, not mad, as the others feared, but clean, too clean, like it belonged to someone who had been reborn. Sylar began to watch. He found a spot near the tower where the mirror chamber's vents exhaled warm air. From there, he listened, night after night, and one night he heard a second voice, not echo, not illusion, another presence, not human, but present. It spoke only once. You are ready. Silar went pale. He packed nothing, wrote no note. He walked into the mirror wing, past the guards, past the darkened torches, toward the door. It opened for him. He did not return, but a letter did. Delivered the next morning, folded in 2, signed in blood. No wax, no seal. The parchment read, "He has remembered what we are." That was all. The palace entered its final silence. The queen disappeared. The ministers scattered. Even the vicar fled, abandoning his station after he claimed to have seen his own reflection smile before he did. The empire functioned without a head, without a voice, without a throne, but inside the eastern wing the emperor remained, and he was not alone. Witnesses, those who dared to watch the tower from afar, spoke of movement at the windows, flickers of robes, of multiple shapes standing at the glass. Once a child's laugh was heard. Once a second heartbeat was recorded in the stone. Once the door opened. No one entered, no one left. But the torches outside blew out on their own. For the first time since its forging, the mirror cracked a single line down its center. Not jagged, straight, deliberate, as if it had chosen to break. Inside the chamber, the emperor knelt before it, head bowed, hair falling like threads of silver over his face. He whispered something and wept, not from grief, but from knowledge, the kind that has no words, no page, only silence, only glass. No one saw him in the final days, not the guards, not the messengers, not the few remaining servants who still passed through the silent corridors of the imperial residence, now choked with dust and dread. Only the mirror remained, and even it had changed. The crack down its center had widened, not in glass, but in essence. The surface no longer reflected what stood before it. It showed other things, a desert blooming under black skies, an orchard of statues all weeping, a tower wrapped in wings. Some said it no longer reflected this world at all. On the 7th day, the eastern wing locked itself. Not by bolt or bar, but as if the palace itself no longer recognized its own rooms. Doors refused to open. Windows showed stone where sky once was. One servant lost for 12 hours reappeared in the chapel cellar, trembling and blind. He muttered only one sentence. He stepped through. By then, the empire had dissolved. The last northern provinces declared independence. The army broke into factions. No one claimed the throne, no one wanted to. They said the mirror still ruled, and perhaps it did. The final record came from a palace scribe who returned weeks later under royal seal to retrieve the crown. He made it as far as the outer mirror hall. There he found it, the emperor's robe, folded with impossible precision. At the base of the cracked mirror, beside it, his ring still warm to the touch, and a single word carved into the stone floor with a shard of mirrored glass. Return. No body, no blood, just the mirror, silent. When the scribe bent to inspect the carving, he paused. His reflection did not move. It stared at him, breathing, waiting. He left everything, even the ring. He walked away barefoot, never crossing that threshold again. The mirror room was sealed, and yet stories persist of a man in distant villages dressed in grey, with eyes like silver coins. He speaks little, but when he does, people listen and forget what they heard. Of children who dream of doorways made of glass and wake with ink on their fingers. Of a voice on the wind that calls from reflective pools. Remember. Some say he became a god, others a prisoner. Some say he never existed at all. But deep beneath the palace ruins, because yes, the palace collapsed in a storm the following winter, there are tunnels. Old ones, forgotten by maps, and in those tunnels behind rusted gates, a door of stone remains, smooth, polished. And in it, if the torchlight hits just right, you can still see a shape inside, still kneeling, still waiting for you. What do you think happened to the emperor? Was he mad? Enlightened? Replaced? Leave your theories in the comments. We want to hear the strangest one. And if you watched until the end, you already know. This wasn't just a story. This was a reflection. Subscribe for more. You've only scratched the surface.